The rooftop was alive with soft candlelight and the hum of jazz from a distant corner, but the moment I arrived, the tension was tangible. My father, already seated, offered a polite smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. My sister, in her tailored designer dress, leaned over the table and whispered loud enough for the waiter to hear, "Clara, are you sure you can actually afford this place on that vague consulting job of yours?" I felt the words, measured, but I didn't flinch. My lips curved into a subtle smile. "I manage," I said softly, lifting my gaze to the city skyline, letting the lights do half the talking. The waiter lingered nearby, adjusting the silverware, unaware of the quiet storm settling across the table. Her laugh, sharp and deliberate, bounced off the glass walls. My brother glanced at me, eyebrow raised, as if daring me to justify myself. The subtle accusation lingered in the air, more oppressive than any outright insult. My father shifted uncomfortably, glancing between his two daughters, clearly torn between amusement and concern. Finally, my sister's words landed like a gauntlet. "Why don't you just prove it, Clara?" Her tone was teasing, but the challenge was clear. My hand rested lightly on my black card in my clutch. No words, no dramatics, just a quiet, controlled acknowledgement that the challenge had been issued. I placed the card gently on the table. "As you wish," I murmured, the calmness in my voice doing more than any argument could. The tension thickened. The waiter's eyes flicked to the card, then to my sister, then back to me. I could feel the room holding its breath, waiting to see if I would crumble, or if I would simply exist, composed, while they misjudged me. Have you ever felt judged for money you quietly earned? I'm Clara, the youngest in my family, always underestimated, always the quiet worker while my siblings flaunted titles and bonuses. I keep my life simple, a small apartment in Queens, modest clothes, but today, that simplicity was under scrutiny. I didn't react. I stayed composed, letting the weight of their doubt settle where it belonged. I didn't realize that 5 minutes later, everything would change. The table reflected a map of achievements I was quietly excluded from. My sister's banker husband sipped his wine with practiced ease. Her MBA brother straightened his cufflinks like a walking ledger of financial confidence, and my father surveyed the scene with a mixture of pride and mild judgment. Compared to them, my vague consulting job seemed almost laughable. I, meanwhile, kept my composure. My apartment in Queens wasn't flashy. My clothes weren't couture. My gestures were measured. I gave quietly, always observing, always listening, never needing approval. The contrast between their visible success and my understated life was glaring, and I let it be. Yet beneath the calm exterior, I was aware of the unspoken calculations happening across the table. Every smile, every raised eyebrow, every subtle glance was a tiny deposit in their bank of assumptions. And assumptions, I knew, had a way of crumbling spectacularly when the right evidence appeared. Then, almost ritualistically, I placed my black card on the table. Not as a boast, not as a confrontation, simply as a statement. The next move was theirs to misjudge, and I would remain composed. The glint of the card caught the candlelight. The tension was tangible. The room paused, waiting for the silent test, unaware that this small act would tip the balance of perception irrevocably. The waiter approached, polite but attentive, and I slid the black card across the table. My sister's lips curled into a faint, triumphant smile. "Let's see if this fake card works," she murmured, loud enough for the waiter to hear. My brother chuckled, and my father shifted uneasily, sensing the tension but unsure how to intervene. I remained still, calm. Inside, a quiet anticipation settled like a slow tide. I had prepared for this moment, not to prove them wrong, but to allow the truth to reveal itself at the perfect pace. My hand rested lightly on the table, fingertips brushing the polished wood, watching the subtle shifts in their expressions. The waiter swiped the card and paused. My sister's amusement deepened. My brother leaned in, already calculating the outcome in his head. "Declined," the waiter said. Finally, a ripple of surprise and satisfaction coursed across the table. My sister's laughter rang a little too loud, her eyes shining with a mix of triumph and disbelief. "Finally," she whispered, "you've been exposed." My father's face tightened, caught between pride and embarrassment. I didn't flinch. I didn't explain. I simply held my posture, letting the silence carry the weight. This wasn't my defeat, it was the first turn in a pattern they didn't yet understand. Her laugh bounced across the rooftop, sharp and triumphant. Finally, I knew it, my sister said, leaning back, arms crossed, as if she had unearthed some hidden truth about me. My brother's eyes narrowed, calculating, as he confirmed aloud, I've checked the math. There's no way your income could cover this. Even the banker husband chimed in, lecturing on credit fraud and financial responsibility, as if I were a reckless amateur caught in a trap. My father's discomfort was visible. He shifted in his chair, clearing his throat, caught between defending me and maintaining decorum. Around us, the other diners glanced briefly, sensing tension but unaware of the specifics. The public nature of it made every smirk, every whispered remark, feel amplified. I didn't speak. I didn't defend. I let the room settle into its own assumptions. Each accusation, each jab, reinforced the narrative my family had constructed, that I was overreaching, pretending, maybe even reckless. The silence was my shield, and in it, I quietly observed the cracks forming in their confidence, even as they assumed mine. Then, slowly, I pulled out my phone. My fingers tapped with deliberate calm, each motion measured. The device became my anchor, a tool of quiet authority. Eyes flicked toward me, curiosity mixed with suspicion. The tension shifted ever so slightly, and the room collectively leaned forward, unconsciously aware that the next few moments could redefine the assumptions they were so certain of. The room seemed to close in. My sister's voice dripped with incredulity. Are you seriously pretending to be this wealthy? This is reckless, Clara. People could get hurt. My brother leaned forward, brow furrowed, his tone a mix of concern and thinly veiled judgment. Even my father's eyes held a trace of doubt, a shadow that made me question if my silence had been a mistake. I caught myself briefly, considering the possibility that they might be right. Was my calm too quiet? Had I misjudged the impact of not defending myself immediately? But as quickly as the thought appeared, I dismissed it. I had always measured my steps, calculated the moments when revelation would carry the most weight. Emotional reactions could distract from the truth. Composure made it undeniable. Their gaslighting pressed in. You're risking everything on a facade, my sister said, each word sharpened like a scalpel. The waiter hovered awkwardly, unsure of whether to intervene or leave us to our private drama. I didn't answer. I simply observed the performance of my family, noting the subtle shifts in posture, the micro-expressions that betray their own insecurities. Then, movement at the edge of the terrace caught my attention. A man in a tailored suit, walking quickly, determination in every step. My pulse quickened, not with fear, but with anticipation. He wasn't part of my family, and yet his approach promised to disrupt the narrative they had so eagerly constructed. The suited man stopped just short of our table, slightly out of breath but composed. His presence alone shifted the atmosphere. The staff straightened subtly, the waiter stepped aside with visible deference. This wasn't just a manager. This was someone higher. Ms. Hayes, he asked, his voice careful, respectful. My sister's expression sharpened. Oh, so now they're using names, she muttered under her breath. My brother folded his arms, bracing for what he clearly assumed would be confirmation of my embarrassment. The man offered a polite nod. I'm terribly sorry for the confusion. There appears to have been a payment issue. The phrase landed exactly as my family needed it to. Payment issue. My sister exhaled, victorious. My brother leaned back, almost relieved that the universe had restored financial order. Even my father's shoulders dropped slightly, as though disappointment had finally found its justification. I told you, my sister whispered. You can't fake this level of lifestyle forever. The executive director, because that's who he clearly was, kept his posture steady, hands clasped in front of him. He didn't look at my sister. He looked only at me. There was no accusation in his eyes. Only professional agency. I assure you, he continued, this situation is entirely our responsibility. That made my brother pause. Just slightly. The man cleared his throat. We cannot process your payment tonight. My sister smiled openly now. Of course you can't. A beat of silence stretched across the table. Then the executive director finished his sentence. Because our parent company currently owes your firm $1.8 million from the recent cybersecurity breach remediation contract. Silence doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it settles like gravity. My sister's smile froze first. Not dramatically, just slightly misaligned with the moment. My brother blinked, processing numbers that didn't fit his earlier equations. My father straightened in his chair, the embarrassment on his face slowly replaced by something closer to confusion. The executive director continued calmly, "Our accounting department flagged the charge because of the outstanding balance. Until it's cleared, we're not permitted to accept payment from your account." No apology from me. No explanation. I simply nodded, as though this were an ordinary inconvenience. I watched them recalibrate in real time. Their earliest certainty, so confident, so final, now hovered uncertainly between doubt and disbelief. My sister reached for her phone. My brother's jaw tightened. The banker husband, who had just delivered a lecture on credit integrity, suddenly found the table fascinating. I didn't gloat. Power rarely needs volume. The director added one more detail, almost casually. The outstanding amount is related to services provided by Anderson Events' parent cybersecurity division. He paused briefly, then clarified the name. From Anderson Events. My sister was already typing. I could see it, the frantic precision of someone searching for a loophole. Anderson Events, she repeated quietly, as if saying it twice might shrink it into something manageable. It's the hospitality branch, I said evenly. The cybersecurity division operates under the same holding structure. My brother looked up sharply. You're saying you, what? Consulted for them? Not exactly. I kept my tone neutral. We handled the breach response across 12 properties after their reservation database was compromised. Full infrastructure audit, ransomware containment, regulatory compliance reporting. The terminology shifted the energy at the table. This wasn't vague freelancing language. This was operational command. The contract value was $1.8 million. I continued. Phase 2 expanded to include long-term vulnerability monitoring. My sister's scrolling slowed. Her eyes flicked to a headline on her screen. I didn't need to see it to know what she'd found. Anderson's Cybersecurity Group. Founder, Clara Hayes. Founded at 24. Clients include multiple Fortune 500 hospitality chains. Featured speaker at UN Digital Infrastructure Summit. My brother's voice dropped. Is this you? I took a slow sip of water instead of answering immediately. Timing matters. Yes. The word was quiet, almost gentle. My sister's phone screen reflected in her widened eyes as she scrolled further down the page. Her breathing changed. Subtle, but noticeable. Then she whispered it. You were on Forbes 30 Under 30. Recognition changes posture. My sister sat straighter now, not in superiority, but in recalculation. My brother's analytical confidence had shifted into silent assessment. They weren't mocking anymore. They were measuring. Yes, I said simply. 3 years ago. No elaboration. Just a fact. I didn't explain the first office, a borrowed conference room with unstable Wi-Fi. I didn't describe the months I paid employees before paying myself. I didn't recount the nights I slept on the office couch while negotiating contracts across time zones. None of that would save this moment. Instead, I gave them numbers. We have 42 employees now. 2 operational hubs. Long-term contracts with hospitality groups and financial institutions. My brother's voice was almost clinical. Revenue. Last fiscal year, $96 million. Silence. I let it settle before adding. Personally, after equity valuation and retained shares, my net worth as of last quarter was approximately $42 million. The banker husband inhaled slowly. He understood valuation models. He knew those numbers weren't fantasy. And yet, my sister said carefully, you live in Queens. I own the building, I replied. It's part of a mixed-use real estate portfolio. 3 commercial properties, 1 residential. The penthouse downtown is rented. Their expressions shifted again. Not envy. Not yet. Something more destabilizing. Choice. I lived simply because I preferred clarity over spectacle. Because visibility complicates negotiation. Because underestimated people are rarely challenged at full strength. My sister looked at me differently now. Not as a fraud. Not as a sibling to mock. As a variable she had miscalculated. My brother cleared his throat. 4 to 2 million. I corrected him calmly. That was last quarter. It's closer to 28 in liquid assets. The numbers lingered, but I didn't let them become the centerpiece. Money without context feels loud. Strategy feels quiet. I didn't hide it to deceive you, I said evenly. I just never volunteered it. My sister's jaw tightened slightly. Why? Because I wanted to see who you were without it. I thought, but I didn't say that. Because I didn't want the treatment to change, I answered instead. I wanted my work to exist separately from family dynamics. That landed heavier than the revenue figures. My father looked at me differently now, not embarrassed, not doubtful, curious, almost searching for the daughter he thought he understood. I organized tonight, I continued calmly, not as a display, as a gift. I reached into my bag and slid a folder across the table toward him. Inside were renderings and contracts. I've already secured the venue for your 40th anniversary celebration next spring. Private estate in Lake Geneva. Full event production handled internally. My sister blinked. My brother leaned forward. My father slowly opened the folder. No speeches, I added. No press. Just family. The banker husband exhaled quietly, absorbing the scale of what that implied. I wasn't correcting them with arrogance. I was positioning myself with intention. My mother, who had been silent through most of this, finally spoke. Her voice was softer than I expected. Clara, are you actually happy? The question wasn't about money. It wasn't about reputation. It was about identity. And for the first time that evening, I felt something shift that had nothing to do with valuation. The executive director reappeared with a quiet efficiency that felt different now. Not cautious, not skeptical, respectful. Complimentary champagne, Ms. Hayes, he said, placing the bottle at the center of the table. No one questioned the gesture this time. Glasses were filled. The sound of liquid meeting crystal carried a strange finality, like the closing of a case no one realized they were building against me. My sister looked at me first. Really looked at me. Not as competition. Not as a younger sibling to correct. I'm sorry, she said. The words were controlled, but sincere enough to register. I shouldn't have assumed. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't tearful. It was recalibration. My father raised his glass slowly. There was pride there now. Subtle, restrained, but unmistakable. You built all of this, quietly. Yes, I replied. Because power doesn't require witnesses. The atmosphere had changed, but I didn't indulge it. I didn't perform humility. I didn't perform dominance. I remained exactly who I had been at the beginning of the evening. The difference was perception. My brother, however, wasn't finished calculating. His analytical instinct couldn't leave one loose thread untied. He leaned forward slightly, gaze steady. So if they owe you $1.8 million, he said carefully, why did the black card decline in the first place? The table stilled again. A smaller question, but a precise one. And this time, the answer wouldn't just reveal wealth. It would reveal assumption. It didn't decline, I said calmly. My brother frowned slightly. The waiter said. He said it couldn't be processed. There's a difference. I folded my hands lightly on the table. When a vendor owes my company an outstanding balance of that size, our system automatically flags transactions tied to that corporate structure. It's not a bank rejection. It's a compliance hold. The banker husband's expression shifted first. He understood internal controls, so the charge was blocked by your own firm. In effect, I said, our finance team doesn't allow outgoing payments to entities with unresolved receivables. It protects leverage. Silence. My sister's earlier confidence now replayed itself in her mind. I could see it. The laughter. The whispers. The certainty. You assumed it was fraud, I added gently. You assumed I was pretending. No accusation in my tone. Just observation. My father looked down at his glass. My brother leaned back, absorbing the implication that his financial calculations had been incomplete. The mistake wasn't theirs for questioning. It was theirs for concluding. The executive director stepped back discreetly, leaving the table to its new equilibrium. No one reached for their phones now. No one challenged the numbers. We finished dinner quietly after that. Conversation returned in careful increments, safer topics, measured tones. But as we stood to leave the rooftop terrace, the silence that followed us to the elevator wasn't awkward. It was reflective, and reflection can be heavier than humiliation. The elevator doors closed, sealing us inside a mirrored box of shared reflection. No audience, no waitstaff, no skyline to soften the edges. Just family. My sister finally spoke. You could have told us. I met her eyes in the reflection before turning to face her directly. Would it have changed anything? She didn't answer. That's why I didn't, I continued. Not to hide, not to deceive, but because I wanted to see who we were without numbers in the room. My brother exhaled slowly. We misjudged you. Yes, I said, without sharpness. But I also let you. That part mattered. I had allowed the underestimation, allowed the jokes about my vague consulting, allowed the quiet comparisons. Not because I lacked confidence, but because information, once released, changes dynamics permanently. Money doesn't just upgrade lifestyle. It upgrades perception. And perception rewrites relationships. I didn't need you to think I was successful, I said. I needed to know I was. The elevator descended floor by floor, each second stretching the weight of what had shifted tonight. My father placed a hand briefly on my shoulder, not as reassurance, as acknowledgement, pride without spectacle. The doors opened into the lobby's marble quiet. My sister hesitated before stepping out. I'm sorry, she said again, softer this time. I nodded, not magnanimous, not triumphant, just steady. Some revelations cost money, others cost pride, and the most irreversible ones, they cost the version of you people thought they understood. Some revelations cost pride. The change wasn't loud. It never is. Over the next few weeks, my sister's tone shifted first. Fewer jokes, fewer financial comparisons. When she spoke about work, it was no longer framed as instruction, it was conversation. My brother started asking questions differently. Not to challenge, to understand. He sent me an article about emerging cyber regulations with a simple text. Thought this might interest you. It wasn't an apology. It was respect translated into action. My father mentioned the anniversary party to relatives with quiet pride. Not exaggerated, just certain. Clara's handling it, he would say, and that sentence carried new weight. No one referenced the black cardigan. Not directly, but the dynamic had reset. Not because I had money, because I had composure when they expected collapse. The anniversary planning meetings became collaborative instead of corrective. My opinions weren't filtered through doubt. They were considered. And I realized something subtle but important. This was never about the rooftop, or the champagne, or the contract balance. It was about identity, who they thought I was, and who I had quietly become without asking for permission. We never spoke about that night as a turning point. No one labeled it. No one dramatized it. But something permanent had shifted. Not my wealth. Not my company. Not my lifestyle. Their perception. And perception, once corrected, rarely returns to its original shape. I still live in Queens. I still prefer quiet mornings over gala invitations. I still let people underestimate me in rooms where strategy matters more than applause. Success, I've learned, is more sustainable when it isn't constantly performing itself. That rooftop dinner didn't prove I was rich. It proved I was steady. Money amplifies character. It doesn't replace it. And the only reason the truth felt powerful that night was because I never needed to weaponize it. I simply let it arrive when it was structurally undeniable. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't defend myself. I didn't demand respect. I let clarity do what emotion never could. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can reveal isn't your bank balance. It's the fact that you never needed their approval in the first place.